The Johnson family had always loved their quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the perfect place to raise their 6-year-old son, Ethan. Their German shepherd, Max, had been part of the family for years, a loyal, gentle giant who adored Ethan and was always by his side. But lately, something had changed, something dark and unsettling. It started one ordinary night. Ethan was tucked into bed, and Max was lying on the floor beside him as usual. But around midnight, the house was jolted awake by the sound of Max barking, a deep, guttural bark that sent chills down Sarah and Mark's spines. They rushed into Ethan's room to find Max standing at the foot of the bed, hackles raised, barking furiously at nothing. Ethan was sitting up, wide-eyed and trembling, pointing at the corner of the room. "The shadow! The shadow!" he cried. Sarah and Mark exchanged worried glances. There was nothing there. They calmed Ethan down, stroked Max's fur, and chalked it up to a bad dream. But the next night it happened again, and the night after that. Every night, like clockwork, Max would bark at the same time, 2:17 a.m., and Ethan would scream about the shadow. The parents were horrified. What was happening to their son, and why was Max acting so strangely? They tried everything. They took Max to the vet, thinking he might be sick or anxious. The vet found nothing wrong. They consulted a dog trainer who suggested Max might be overprotective, but no amount of training stopped the barking. They even moved Ethan to a different room, but the shadow followed him. And every night, Max would bark, his voice growing hoarse, his body trembling with effort. The family was unraveling. Sleep became a luxury they couldn't afford. Sarah and Mark took turns staying up, watching over Ethan, but no matter what they did, the barking and the screaming continued. Ethan grew pale and withdrawn, his once bright eyes now haunted. He started talking about the shadow during the day, describing it as a tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes that whispered things only he could hear. Desperate for answers, Sarah decided to set up a camera in Ethan's room. She needed to see what was happening when the lights went out. That night, she and Mark stayed up, watching the live feed on their laptop. At first, everything seemed normal. Ethan sleeping peacefully, Max lying by his bed. But then at exactly 2:17 a.m., the room grew cold. The camera flickered, and a dark, shadowy figure emerged from the corner. Max immediately jumped up, barking furiously, positioning himself between Ethan and the shadow. The shadow loomed closer, its form shifting and twisting, but Max's relentless barking seemed to hold it back. After a few tense moments, the shadow retreated, disappearing into the wall. Sarah and Mark were stunned. They had always thought Max was the problem, but in reality, he was the protector. The shadow wasn't just a figment of Ethan's imagination. It was real, and Max had been fighting it off every night. The next morning, they called a paranormal investigator, Dr. Evelyn Carter, who had a reputation for solving cases like this. Dr. Carter arrived that evening, her equipment in tow. She listened to their story with a grave expression and immediately began setting up sensors and cameras in Ethan's room. As night fell, the family gathered in the living room, their nerves on edge. At 2:17 a.m., the barking began. Dr. Carter's equipment picked up a sudden drop in temperature and strange electromagnetic fluctuations. The shadow appeared again, but this time Dr. Carter was ready. She began speaking in a calm, commanding voice, reciting a cleansing ritual she had learned from years of experience. Max continued to bark, his voice growing hoarse, but he didn't back down. The shadow writhed and shrieked, its form dissolving into smoke as the ritual reached its climax. Finally, it was gone. The room fell silent. Max stopped barking and lay down, exhausted, but calm. Ethan slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Dr. Carter explained that the house was built on land with a dark history. Decades ago, a tragic event had occurred there, and the shadow was a malevolent spirit that had latched onto Ethan, drawn to his innocence. Max, with his heightened senses, had been the only one aware of its presence. He had been protecting Ethan all along. The family was overwhelmed with gratitude. They realized that Max wasn't just their pet. He was their guardian, their hero. From that day on, Max was treated like royalty, and Ethan slept peacefully, knowing his loyal dog would always protect him. Sometimes the things we fear the most are the things we don't understand. But with courage, love, and a little help from man's best friend, even the darkest shadows can be overcome. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. And remember, sometimes the bravest hero has 4 legs and a wagging tail.